You'll find for me, I'm a pretty transparent guy. We'll have a lot of fun. I hope we learn a couple of things, and I'm hoping actually I learn a couple things from you when we maybe get to some Q&A. But it's not that I love public speaking. I love understanding what's happening kind of in the world around us. I get to be in the workforce space and see a lot of things, and love being able to kind of create and tell stories, both quantitatively and qualitatively. And so, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, if there are things that you disagree with or things you're like, that doesn't make any sense, I promise you I won't humiliate you. I would love to just kind of hear your point of view. So we'll kind of get started, and really I'm not going to talk at all about our company, but just for context and kind of I say why it's important is because I feel like I have a pretty special seat on the bus to understand what's happening in the workforce. So we are a staffing company. I joined there about 5 years ago. I used to work for Kohl's department stores. I did that for about 20 years. And my background, and I always say this because I think it's important for me anyway, I'm a finance guy by training. That's what my degree is in. I went on a college recruiting trip when I was like 23 years old, and then I essentially never came back. I was in human resources for 20 of those 21 years at Kohl's, ultimately led human resources for them nationally. At that time they were a little bit bigger. I think there were 350 internal employees just within human resources. We hired about 150,000 people a year. So I kind of had this really strong desire to go, I want to run a company, and I found myself at 3 years old or 42 years old going like, well, what do I want to do grow up? And I'm not really an HR person. Everyone's like, no, you are. You did that for 20 years. I'm like, but I want to do finance stuff. And I took like 4 or 5 months and talked to hundreds of people. This was right before or pre-COVID, and ended up falling kind of into this staffing world, and I've really enjoyed it for a couple of reasons. But the first part is we get to see what's happening on the front lines and make a difference with people. And the second part is we have a really strong motto in our company that says, if we can't make you better at what you do, then we're just kind of doing staffing. But the reason I think this is so important is, it says we have like 7,000 people, we call them associate employees, temps, at about, 1,800 companies across the Midwest, some on the East Coast, some out in Denver. We'll be opening some stuff in the South. But if you think about what I get to see, and we've got some pretty rich data, I get to see what's happening, I'd say a lot in kind of the $17 an hour to $30 an hour across the Midwest, by sector, by employee size, just about anything that you can think of, we get to have insights into both quantitatively and qualitatively. And then the second part is really getting an insight from, I'll say management, because that's who kind of hires us, and also placing professional people across the Midwest. So the folks that are managing these folks, running big projects, engineers, plant managers, we get to hear kind of front to back and all that. So that is not a commercial on us. You could actually take the QPS name off it, but what's important is I feel like I get to see a lot. So the part we're going to talk about today is really two different parts, and you're going to say, well, how do these connect? The first is give you a little bit of maybe data on things that you probably already see, add a little bit of commentary to what we're seeing, and I'm calling this kind of like the chaos part. And then we're going to kind of pivot from there and say like, well, does that really matter? And what are the things that we should all focus on in our worlds, regardless if you're in management, human resources, running the company, or some other support role. Now, I did want to put what a difference a year makes is I heard Red Lobster went out of business. Anyone disappointed with that? No? All right, I did. I did not. I heard it was all about the all-you-can-eat shrimp. I promise you that's what they said. I don't know if I believe it. But when you click through what's really happening, there's a couple of things that we look at the macro level, and then we look at these, across the board. But the point that we're going to see here is that the numbers, in my opinion, really aren't telling a huge story until you kind of dig deep. But does anyone feel like coming out of COVID, hiring was really hard, right? All of you should be raising your hands, right? Hiring was really hard. And I think we continue to hear the narrative today that hiring is still hard. But if we were to go back and we did the same discussion 5 years ago, 10 years ago, again, I've been in this space for a little bit, has hiring ever been really easy? I don't think so, right? I think as human beings, we always have something to complain about. I just had lunch with a lady. She's not in here, so I can talk about her. But she went to the AI one. She's going to take notes from me. But, she literally, and she's like my age, she's like, oh, this generation just doesn't work hard like they used to. And I said to her, I'm like, do you think our parents said the same thing? And do you think that your grandpa and grandma said the same thing? And the answer, I believe, is like, yes. I think hiring is always going to be some version of hard, but the job openings continue to be really high. This is ticking up consistently month over month. It's still historically incredibly low. 3.9 will be forever a very low number. When you're in very low single digits, that's low unemployment. It's actually close to zero employment, but it is ticking up a little bit. The part that I think is, interesting is, well, has there a lot changed since COVID? And, I'm kind of tired, if maybe you guys are, of like, well, since COVID, this is different, right? But we do know that probably post-COVID, the amount of churn, job openings, and people literally getting huge pay increases for literally jumping ship, and if they weren't, their employers were giving massive increases. There was a significant and disproportionate increase in hourly wages in entry level. That's where the biggest squeeze was. In fact, from COVID, kind of from the day it happened up until about November of last year, it'll get better, sir, I promise. Just kidding. I've always wanted to do comedy, but I wouldn't make it. But for that kind of like 30-month period, they were in the high single digits, unprecedented, 8 to 12% increases, right? So if you fast forward and you're in our space, like, is 8 to 12% increases on wages sustainable? No, and everyone's passing increases, right? We know how inflation happened, we know all that stuff happening. Our data suggests that over the past probably 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, it is absolutely leveling out to more historic norms. We measure it by month because we can see it in our pay rates of what our employers are paying. And for us, it's about 0.2 to 0.25% every single month, equals 3.5-ish, more historic, right? But when you think about these two things of the Great Resignation and the Great Stay, we are seeing in our data for the professional side something that is really unique. And that is that our job orders continue to be decent. There's people that are hiring professional folks. But one measurement that we started doing about 6 years ago, never thought we would need it, is the number of people that we offered the job that was everything that they wanted, and did they accept it or not? Call it acceptance rate, decline rate, whatever you want to do. That number has never been higher since we've measured it. So you wanted to be an engineer making $72,000 a year within 15 miles of your house. We found your dream job. They love you. You know where your desk is. We offer you the job. Just kidding. I'm not going to take it. And you're like, wait. Remember that time when you said, this is what... And so there's two things that are happening. The first thing that's happening is that employers have a good memory, and they're going, it took me so long to hire you, and I am not losing you for $3,000, $5,000, $10,000. So people are getting bought back. I'm telling you that will be a challenging strategy, because that person now is a little bit of a target on their back that we see when they're like, you just told us you wanted more money, and by the way, you told us you wanted to leave. And you know how that works. The second thing that we see happening, and this is qualitative, but we hear it, is we think the story is they go home and they say, honey, I got the job. And he or she says, well, how much is it? And they go, I got a $5,000 raise to go to XYZ company. And they go, that's great. Anyway, no. Are you crazy? Did you just read about that company laying off 300 people and this company laying off 400 people? Like, you're going to go take that risk, be last in, first up. We're absolutely seeing that. In fact, it's like the number has never been really high. So saying it's up 300% is kind of a crazy number. But it is a really interesting phenomena, and we think it's mostly surrounding that. So just another data point. But I will tell you that hiring especially for hourly people, is easier. The candidate profiles that we are seeing, and anyone that says that hiring isn't easier, I won't tell your boss if you're in human resources, but hiring is significantly easier. And so for us, we always see the tip of the spear on what's happening with employment. 18 months ago, 19 months ago, we started seeing some significant changes in what's happening with the employment market, but it wasn't actually affecting hiring yet. And that is that employers were taking longer to make decisions. They were being much more cautious when they said, hey, we want 20 people. By the time it got to it, they said, just kidding, we want 10. And then the other part that happened is the number of candidates started spiking, but the unemployment numbers didn't change. So why would that happen? What happens in that case is that all of the data that you see coming from essentially government is a huge lag. And I'm going to show you something here in just a second. The last thing I just put in here, I don't know where this hybrid thing is going to land. It feels like being flexible is never going away. But the reason I wanted to just kind of talk about this stuff is that really a year, we're not seeing things in the headlines show up very differently, but I'm telling you, behind the scenes, what's happening in the employment market has really changed a lot in 18 months. So I get to hang out with kind of my peers, so to speak, that own manufacturing companies and warehousing companies. And we actually had a conversation the other night. It's like 7 business owners, and they were like, my management team is just telling me how great they are with their culture and all the things they live, because retention continues to be better and hiring is easier. I'm like, great. And hiring is easier and retention has improved by about 50%. So a stat that I think is interesting on the hourly side is about 30% of the people in the temporary labor space wouldn't make it for past 2 weeks. That number shocks you. It's a reality. It's part of kind of temporary labor. That number is actually now doubled, meaning they're lasting 4 to 5 and 6 weeks, which is a huge difference for our employers, which is a good thing. This is really interesting, and this is the part where I'm saying there's a little bit of a story that doesn't tell exactly what's going on out there. So I don't know if you could maybe point to the arrow that you participate in, but when you hear about huge increases in the job market, and you say, wow, the economy's added 180,000 jobs, and I get an email every once in a while from the chairman of our company going, great news that the economy added 320,000 jobs. When you parse this out and you look what's happening behind the scenes, huge in the healthcare space, probably not completely surprising, but the amount that's happening in government and in this kind of, there's another one, yeah, there it is, social assistance, things around that space is really, really high. But if I were to do a survey of kind of where we participate, my guess is that 75% of this room participates in an area that there hasn't been a lot of job growth. Also happens to be the area that we participate in. And so there's a little bit of a misnomer happening out there of like, there's this huge job growth. How come there's so many people that need to find jobs? And that's what we're seeing. The part that I also think is a little bit interesting is just this tale of 2 stories. So if you were to pick something that said, if I couldn't look at open jobs from a unemployment standpoint, for me, if I was just a normal person that not in this space, the number of online job postings might be a good indicator of, are there a lot of jobs? Is that fair? Right? It's probably the best indicator of what's going on out there. I don't know if you guys read, but Indeed laid off 1,000 people a couple weeks ago. Their job postings are down 35 to 40% in 7 months. They still have 47% of the market. Who uses Indeed in here? And you guys get like a 30% price increase this year? Yeah? If not, it's coming. Like, I'm not joking. Maybe it's just for staffing companies, but I literally think they got with their board and said, if postings go down by 30%, and that's how we make our money, you know what we should do? We should just raise our prices 30%. But the point on that story is that, Indeed actually is a powerhouse in the market. They have the largest share. But yeah, their online job postings are down 30 to 35% literally in less than a half of a year. That is a data point. But there are things that are absolutely conflicting, right? We read that job growth is amazing. We're also reading about tons of layoffs. We're also reading that we see a lot in the unemployment paid, right? So when unemployment payments go up, that tells you that people either can't find work, not willing to work, whatever. That is starting to creep up as well. The point in this entire thing is if you had to go walk out of here and say, what did Ryan just try to tell you? I think there's really two things. Number one, that things continue to evolve very quickly in the employment market, and if you're not seeing it, I would challenge you to kind of look under the covers and find out what those things might look like. And the second thing is that we are seeing that the newness of jobs continues to go down. Every company that we talk to is obviously talking about automation. I'm sure if it hasn't hit your industry, something related will. But what we're excited about is, just if you read the story about the Model T getting invented, and they're like, oh my goodness, it's going to take away all the jobs everywhere else. Automation will create new jobs. It absolutely will. So we're excited to kind of do a lot of research on what that is. But the point is the employment market is incredibly noisy right now. It's really noisy. So hopefully I just gave you a little bit of kind of what's going on, what we see in employment. And now I'm going to shift completely away from that and talk about, this is the percentage of folks that are, or job postings that have gone down. So the reason I want to talk about that context is if I were to kind of do a little review of history for myself from COVID until about 18 months ago, the number of companies that we saw that were raising their hands saying, our turnover is horrible. Our engagement is in the toilet. We can't find ways to communicate with people. I will tell you as a human resources person, I guess I am, it kind of frustrated me. And this is the reason I'm talking about this is because I think us as employees or human resources folks or folks in leadership, we sometimes care about those types of things when the numbers or the people are showing that it's actually hurting our business. And I would challenge that I don't care how bad retention is, how easy hiring is, or anything in between, keep focused on creating an engaging culture. It is just, I just believe it. I've worked on amazing teams. I've worked for great companies. I've also worked for some challenging teams. So when I started at the company that I'm at now, I was really fortunate. I joined as president, which was, for us, a succession place where our company was sold to the employees. We're 100% employee owned now, which has been a lot of fun. But it was a really interesting time because really successful, 37 years, with an amazing track record of growth, tons of long-term employees, but we were completely stagnant. And I was given this charge of don't screw anything up and don't change anything radical, but make sure that you prepare us for the future and change as much as you need to. Sounds right. And so part of, I guess, my leadership style, but also some of the journey that I've gone on, I want to share just things that I think we should always be focused on. And this does not apply just to leaders. It does not apply just to human resources. This applies to us as employees. So I don't care if you're part of a team of 4 people or leading a team of 10,000. These are some life lessons that I've seen of how we continue to use engagement regardless of the chaos that's going on. And again, I think if I gave this type of presentation every year since 1982, I think we could go, it's chaos right now, isn't it? We could always talk about isn't it crazy right now? It's always going to have some version of chaos, always have some version of challenging things going on. And so what I want to talk about is how do we always create leadership clarity? And again, this is not about you being in a leadership position. How do we drive engagement and how do we create a culture of vulnerability and transparency? The reason that I think these 3 are all really important is that, first of all, having leadership clarity is always the starting point when we're creating change. And again, I think if I were to ask for a show of hands, is anyone in their company going through some change right now or trying to be something different in the next 18 to 24 months? All right, I'm guessing everyone's going to say, yes, we are working on that. I guess if I asked 3 years ago, you'd say the same thing. We are always, hopefully, pointing towards something greater. But the second part is if you can't have an engaged group following behind you, championing your ideas, it's not going to be sustainable, and they're going to do it for the wrong reasons. And the last part for me is probably just a style thing that I think has worked, and I just want to share some of those things. So when you think about leadership clarity, why we do it, how we do it, this is, again, I've done a few different things in a leadership arena, and I think you're always trying to go somewhere, right? And taking over for a team that has been really successful and a really great track record is actually, I think, harder than taking over a business or a team that's been challenged, right? Because every single time they're like, hey, look at the scoreboard, Mr. or Mrs. Like, before you got here, before you took the team over, before you were my manager, before you joined the team, I love your ideas, but anyway, we got them all. The thing that I've learned is making sure that you have clarity about the past is really important. Talking about the wins, getting the entire team together to actually talk about the good old days. And I promise you the good old days weren't always good, but talking about the good old days is actually a really important thing. It's cathartic. It's giving everyone a chance to actually celebrate the pride that they have, but it's also finding opportunities to go, can we talk about that one time? Did that actually work as big as you thought? And getting people to actually talk about, well, maybe it didn't. I'm going to tell you a quick story. So we have about, 55, 60 locations in the Midwest. There's a branch that is in northeast Iowa. And it's kind of like middle of nowhere, but it's been a great branch for us, blah, blah, blah. And we opened it right before I joined the company. We've struggled, we threw tons of resources at it, things in the market change, right? And at the time, the CEO of the company, he was pretty tough on me, like, why can't you get that market to work? Why? Why can't you get that market to work? And I took it really personally, right? Affecting jobs, and it was really hard. So I went through this exercise, and I got kind of the historian in the company, and we've been around 37 years. How many branches we've closed in those 37 years? 44. It was a really healthy exercise to go, hey, can you take me through what happened with these 44? Because I'm learning, like, what happened? Are there learnings? And the point of that exercise was I needed to get clarity. I needed the rest of the team to get clarity, and actually having the historians in the room go, tell me what happened. It was a really healthy exercise. But the second part of that is really clear on the future. I think as leaders and people that are going through change, I think we know the principles, right? You got to be clear. One of the things that I think drives the most engagement is telling people what you don't know. Literally standing in front of a room and saying, this we're going to do, this part is going to happen like this. These two things, I know we're headed north, or I know we're headed to Nebraska. I know we're going to open this division. I don't exactly know how we're going to do that yet. I don't. If you think I have the answers, I don't. The amount of relief that happens when people do that, I have found to be incredibly exciting because, first of all, sometimes people know you don't. And the second part is you're actually bringing people along to say, like, will you help me figure it out? And the third part on the unknown is actually understanding, though, like, we are going to have to get clear on this. Like, we can't live in this gray forever. I've gotten pinched on that last one because you can't just keep telling people I don't know. They're like, at some points, you got to get it figured out. But I've found that is one of the first points in engagement on how to do that. Whoops, went the wrong way. A couple other areas along that, and again, these are just kind of beliefs for me, is that if you don't think employees can drive change, I would just argue you're wrong. Can anyone think of in their company a group of employees that are kind of cliquey and they are really negative and you wish that you could replace them and find new people with a magic wand? Anyone? You have them all pictured? Yep. Me too. I would argue that they are creating change. Now we're talking about the negative side, right? But sometimes it's easier to think of the stuff that drives you crazy, but those employees are creating change. So if you believe that there are negative people that can drive change, I would argue there's always internal employees that can drive change on the positive side. The thing that I've learned here is making sure that you bring people along. Sometimes that are the naysayers. I'm sure everyone's used that trick of the person that absolutely can't stand your idea. You bring them along, like, great, now you're in charge of that, and they love it and hate it all at the same time. But again, if you don't believe that employees can drive change, I think you're missing that. Creating a culture of listening is a behavior, but there's also some process that has to happen with it. I think that if you are at a large company, there probably has to be some kind of process where you actually do listen to employees. But regardless if you work at a small company or a large company, being able to tell stories of listening is important. And by the way, I'm going to tell you things that I've seen work. I have another presentation at 5 over drinks where we can talk about all the things that have not worked and have done really, really bad. But about 15 years ago, there was the CEO of where I worked at Kohl's, and large company 15 years ago even, and there was something that was just, the engagement at the time was really, really bad. And I will never forget it. I was a young manager in the head of HR's office for whatever reason. The CEO walked in really frustrated about something and said, we gotta fix this. This thing can't get figured out. The morale's bad. It was just like this tirade. And I'm like sitting in the corner, and he looked at me and he's like, you got any ideas, Festerling? And I have ideas about everything. They're not good, but I have ideas. And I said to him, his name was Larry, and I said, Larry, have you ever just picked up the phone? We used those at the time, they had cords on them, and literally just called a frontline person and asked them an opinion on something? And then the second thing is, have you ever just picked up the phone and literally said, hey, I heard that you did an amazing job on that thing? He got really mad at me. And what he said wasn't necessarily wrong or inaccurate, but the part that he was wrong about was the impact. And what he said was, that person knows I don't know them. And that person knows that I'm calling just because someone else told me to. And I go, yeah, absolutely. I said, if you do that, I promise you, I'm going to hear about it like 10 times before I go home. He did, and I heard about it like 50 times. That you're never going to believe, right? That phone hangs up and says, you are never going to believe who just called me. You are never going to believe who just asked my opinion on something. You got to be authentic. You got to do those things. One of the things that we do when we get our leadership team together, it's about, I don't know, call it 20, 25 directors and vice presidents. We do it 3 times a year. We just started this, and it's a blast. So it's in a room like this, right? It's got video capabilities. And after every session, right, so we've got like, 8 topics that we'll go through that are 30 minutes or 45 minutes. We go around the room and we say, we use teams. Who are we teamsing on your team? Just we're going to surprise them, we're going to call them, and you're going to publicly thank them for something that they did. And then you're also going to tell them you're going to ask their opinion on something. It's amazing. Like literally, they open their screen and it's the 20 leaders of the entire company in some other state, and they're like, what is happening? And their leader publicly, like, it gets emotional. They're like, I needed you to know that I just talked about you to this whole group. I promise you, the entire region heard about that within 10 minutes. The stories get shared on Yammer, they get shared everywhere. The point is, have other people tell your story. You won't be able to touch every single person, but I promise you, you create an environment where other people will tell your story, it goes a really long way. The last part, second last part is just this notion of standing up and being able to say you're wrong. And again, I don't think this has to do with you're the CEO of the company or the vice president. I think being able to create an environment where you actually tell people like this didn't work. About a month ago, 6 months ago, we had this really big initiative. Everyone got on board. By the way, I asked everyone to get on board, and that's one of the hardest things of engagement is when you have an engaged team, they'll follow you anywhere. right? What happens though when it doesn't work? An unengaged team is like, that sucks, see you later, I'll be there tomorrow, right? An engaged team, they like get sad. They're like, but you said, and I did the thing, and it didn't work. And so the follow-up for that also has to happen. And we have a monthly town hall meeting. And we always have it start off with me. I go through the results, really transparent. I always have a guest speaker. And then we go through things that we're excited about in the next month. And I started the meeting off with, that XYZ initiative sucked. It was the worst. It didn't work, and I own it. Does anyone have any questions about that, or you want to pile on? Like, what's someone going to say? Hey, just so you know that thing sucked. I'm like, yeah, I just said it sucked. But the point is that I think that it allowed for me to be able to recognize when I made a mistake, because we're also trying to create this thing of like, it's okay to make mistakes as long as you learn from it, acknowledge it, and we're going to get better because of it. That's been a game changer for us, is being able to start with a conversation with, tell me what's not working and what can I do to help. But I'm telling you, what we have learned is that if you can't start with, this version of my life professionally right now is not working good, it's just not true, right? If I were to do an interview with each of you right now and go, it's easy to go like, tell me what's awesome, you're going to celebrate this, like, tell me what's not working. 20% of anything that's happening with us professionally, I would argue, it's not going good. Okay, great, now how can we help? That's been a fun thing. For us, we've always had kind of this ownership mentality. Being an employee-owned company has really helped. But again, we try really hard to make sure that creating engagement through this ownership mentality, owning it from start to finish, really, really important. So we've talked a little bit about this vulnerability and transparency. And the part that, you know, we kind of ask ourselves is like, well, how far do you want to go, and where is it a little too much, right? You know, one of the things that I've seen is really making sure that, you know, we're creating this forum to say, hey, here's where I need help, or here's what's not working. But there is a fine line between like, well, you said it's okay to make mistakes. I'm like, yeah, it's okay to make mistakes, but it's not an excuse for performance, so to speak. So again, I can tell you kind of that fine line between going a little too far on that. But I think getting everyone to understand what testing and learning and failing fast, and I always put and cheap. Have anyone ever tried to like change the culture around innovation in your company? I have learned, and I'm still learning, that is probably the hardest. It's one of our values, beliefs, whatever you want to call them. I think innovation is the hardest thing, or at least for me, it's the hardest thing to get, you know, from the front line all the way to the top of leadership. It's like, what does innovation mean, right? Because if I were to go through and ask, like, what's the most innovative thing you can think of? Everyone's going to go, the iPhone or Amazon. You're like, great, I'll invest in your company if you can do that, but otherwise, no. But innovation has to be about what is something new that you're trying. What is something that you've always wanted to try, you can do within your sphere. And I would argue, again, we have a lot of entry-level employees. Excuse me, we make every single person in the company tell their manager, and it's posted in all of our branches, what's one thing that you're trying this month? What is one thing that you're going to try in your job? And it could be as simple as, I'm taking notes in OneNote, and I used to put them in my notebook. Why? Because of this, this, this. Great. But what are you trying to get from that? That has been, we do not have it figured out, but I know that being innovative is something that's always going to be really important for us and probably really important for your companies. But I would love any help if you guys have any behaviors of how to drive innovation. I've just found over my career that's been a really hard one to figure out. We've probably talked about this, but again, I want to make sure just to reiterate that vulnerability does not equal weakness. The very first leadership meeting that I had at our company, I'm sure everyone remembers it because it was bad, but I came in going like, oh, I'm going to go do this. We're going to be vulnerable and we're going to help each other. 23 or 24 people sitting in a big square room. You know, I introduced myself because I hadn't met half the team yet. And I said, we're going to go around the room. And I want to hear one thing that you're excited about, what's going on in your world right now. And I want to hear one thing that's like, And I didn't use the words fail or you're not doing good. Just like one thing that you're like, I don't have it figured out. And I went through it. I started it. I was like, who wants to go next? But I'll jump to the end. 24 people, I promise you, there was not a single person in that entire room that had anything negative. Everyone had to say something negative, but the thing that was negative was usually, if you're running operations, the sales team is, they're really working to get some stuff figured out, and essentially if they get their world figured out, my life would be better. We could not, I got done, I was like, so does anyone, nothing? It was the most passive aggressive, it was amazing actually. I was like, this is unbelievable. But what I learned was that the company was built on, and by the way, very, very successfully, we find your weaknesses, we exploit them, and we will make you fix them. And by the way, that's a strategy. It works. It's not one that I like, because I want people to be open about here's what's not working, and then number two, who can I ask for help? So it's taken 4 years. We're now in our 5th year. We still do that same exact exercise every leadership meeting where we start. And it creates this incredible sense of kind of just openness of like, hey, I didn't know you're struggling with that. And then what we have to do is someone has to sign up to say, I can help you. And so the point is, you don't have to do that with leaders, right? You could do this on a manufacturing line. What's not working in your role, I would promise you, you can use that same thing. But being wrong doesn't equal weakness. In fact, I would argue the folks that can say, I don't have this figured out, will you help me? I promise you, you'll get like 10 hands to go up and say, yes, I'll sign up to help you, for sure. And it's been a really powerful thing. So again, I think just when you think about those things, everyone knows the golden rule, right? Treat others as you would like to be treated. And I'm sure people know what the platinum rule is. Platinum rule is treat others as they want to be treated, because you're not them, right? This goes to everything from how to like people to be recognized, how do they want to be communicated to. One of the things that I think companies will always struggle with is this notion of equality versus equity. And I'll tell you a quick story. It's a company you all know of in town. They're really big, they're really successful, they're awesome. And I was asked to come on their leadership meeting probably like 2 months, 3 months into COVID. It's a very large manufacturer. Like I said, you definitely know them. And they said, hey, can you just talk to us about what's going on out there? We had all their data and just go through some things. So I had a whole deck pulled together. And again, keep in mind, they're a manufacturing company. And so I'm on this Zoom meeting or Teams meeting, I don't remember what it was. And we started going through some of the things of like, hey, how are you working with your people and how are you showing up? And some really good conversation. And we still do business with them. I was scared for a minute that we weren't going to. So I have the CEO, the whole C-suite, Chief Operating Officer, CFO, blah, blah, blah. All the lieutenants. And again, they're a manufacturing company. They were exploding, had lots of people there, all that kind of stuff. And I could tell in all the Zoom meetings, unless their office looks just like their bedroom or their den or the whatever, everyone was working from home, including the HR people. And it's like, 10 o'clock on a Tuesday. It wasn't like Sunday night we're doing this. And so I said, hey, quick question. How many of you are working from home right now? And they literally are like, duh, we're working from home. Did you know COVID's happening? I'm like, yeah, got it. And I said, how many of your employees in the manufacturing facility are working in the manufacturing facility right now? And they're literally like, yeah, this guy's so stupid. Like, they're there. And I said, do you think they know you're not there? And they're literally asking me things like, how can we get our employees to be, these are smart people, how can we get our employees to be motivated? How can we make sure that they really know where, and I said, if I were to walk around right now and say, do you know where Sam or Sally are? And hey, why are they working from home? What would you say? And literally there's like 9 people, the cameras start all clicking off. And I'm the only one, and the only one that's left is the CEO. And I'm like, I am getting fired. Like, they are never asking me back. But the point is, there was an equity thing that was not okay. Don't tell me that COVID's happening and that you can't do this when you're in an office and you're working on the floor 2 feet away from someone that, by the way, probably has a lot less privileges than you do. But I think that same thing applies to just about everything, right? So in my old world at Kohl's, because you probably know more about that, right? The corporate office has some amazing, cool things. Well, can we have Bartolotta's? We don't work there anymore, but could I have Bartolotta's in every store doing catering? Absolutely not. But what does equity mean to be positioned in that environment as a retailer that could show that there's something special? And what we've been working with on manufacturing companies, they literally look at it like, but you have no idea, Ryan, the machines have to run 24/7, 365. We can't have flexibility like we do for our managers, our executives. And I say, okay, fair enough. I'm not looking to shut your machines down. By the way, that affects us. We like people there. It's great. But what does flexibility mean in your environment? And flexibility doesn't mean you work from home. Flexibility means that we are going to try to figure things out better than the 10 other companies that work down the road that are incredibly rigid. And so I think we sometimes get hung up on this equality versus equity. So just something to think about in your world. Small wins rule, like I talked about when I had that meeting with the CEO, him calling one person to ask their opinion and actually tell them they did a good job. I'm telling you, those small wins add up. The thing that I have also learned is sometimes you need to talk about them. You need to start with, remember where we used to be? And remember I was talking about the first part about clarity on the past? Sometimes when you're in the grind, you forget how far you've come. I have a really hard time doing that because it sounds like, look how good we are. And that's not what it's about. But it's about starting things with, you said that communication was really important. And we are working hard at it. Since you have told us that, we are now doing town hall meetings. And I am going through, and this is what we like, I am going through all of the high-level financials because you're an employee owner and you said more communication is better. And by the way, it's not an a la carte menu. So you can't just, I want communication, but only when it's good. No, we are going to communicate. And there's a little bit of subconsciousness that has to happen. You actually have to remind people that they're doing something different. So allow those small wins to rule. And I just think momentum is the most, it's just, momentum's unbelievable. Momentum allows you to kind of roll past the things that didn't work. Also, momentum happens on the negative side as well. Sometimes the worse it gets, but the reverse is true. So I know it's kind of an interesting presentation, but I wanted to just kind of level set that this thing of like, are we in this crazy time? Sure, maybe, I don't know. I think next year will be, I'm pretty sure the year after will be. I'm sure the past 10 years of your career have been the craziest that anyone's ever had. But the point is we're always going to be going through that. And I would just argue that no matter what is happening in the employment market, to really focus on driving engagement. It's just like it's a no regrets move. You're always trying to be better than someone else. So that's what I have. Open up to any questions, comments, things you disagree with. You wish you would have gone to the AI one. I'm okay with that. Yes?
I grew up at a time and in a career where we believed that you got paid for your time and you put it in and you did the work you needed to do. Sometimes you worked harder than the person next to you, but it didn't matter. You were there. Maybe you got a promotion because of it, maybe you didn't. My son, 24, says, Dad, why should I get paid for my time? I want to get paid for my work. And if I get my work done in 6 hours and you're not as smart as I am, it takes you 8.5, and you're getting paid the same, why do I get more work piled on top of me for no additional money? That's a long way of asking the question. Do you believe in a marketplace today you're seeing that desire to be paid and compensated for work versus time? Now, I understand in the manufacturing area that's all the same, but I'm just talking about in general. And how is that creating any chaos?
Yeah, so there's a lot in there, right? I do a discussion on kind of the millennial workforce and the generations and all that kind of stuff. And again, everyone's like, this new, I don't know what generation we're on now, like M or P or something like that. But this, one of the things that I truly believe, right? So whatever group you want to call it, I have never seen such a principled group. And by the way, they're okay with the consequences. Meaning, I mean, again, this is something I can't get my head around, but I'm not them and they're not me, and actually part of me is jealous, is I'm okay not taking that job that's gonna make me do this, this, or this. And by the way, I'm okay living in an apartment until I'm 42. I'm totally okay with that, and not having a new car. In my opinion, they are incredibly principled about the beliefs that they have. And I mean, again, some people I'm sure are not fitting this mold, but I truly believe their principled nature of what they believe rings true all the way through. So to your son going, why would I have to do that? He's not wrong. And I actually think, like, again, so my generation, we talk about this. I mean, let's just use a couple of them, right? Why am I staying loyal to a company when I have seen my parents get laid off and they weren't loyal to them, right? I'm not going to work my entire life for this, and this. I'm actually like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Good luck. I'm not doing that. Are you crazy? But they're not wrong. And I think, you've heard this notion of, like, if you ever want to really upset a high performer, what do? Not deal with a low performer. I guess what I would say in short is, if you want to fight that, or if I as a leader in a company want to fight that, I can. I won't win, because he's going to go do something else, right? If he's that good and he can get done in 6 hours, maybe I'm going to find more work for him that can make him grow, but it's pretty hard to argue with it. It might be annoying. Yes.
So I'd like to piggyback on that. I'm going to pitch my presentation at 3:30.
Yeah.
Because I talk about this very dilemma that's happening in the workplace now with the hybrid work model, and how do you measure performance. And I'll be talking about measuring it with KPIs and initiatives. So people who are high performers and they're effective and efficient, if they can get it done in 5 hours versus 8, it doesn't matter as long as you get it done and you're creating results. I think we're seeing a movement towards that.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and I think what has forced managers to do, which is a good thing, is to actually be better managers, right? Because if I don't know that he or she is doing, it only took 6 hours to get this done, and it's someone else is taking 8, well, maybe 6 actually is the standard, and this person is doing 8 should get fired. But if I don't even know what a baseline is, that's probably a starting point. So I've learned that some of these things have actually forced things up the chain. I know this is like super innovative, but we just started unlimited PTO. I'm joking. And we haven't done it for everybody yet, we will, but it has really forced leaders to have conversations that matter, such as, like, there's someone in the room I used to work with, and what I used to always say to people, like, hey, can I take PTO on Thursday? And every single time, I still say it since I was 22, I have no idea, can you? And they're like, well, I have PTO. I was like, that's cool. Anyway, I have no idea if you can. You know what you have to get done. That is not on me. And if you don't have your work done, you can take PTO. It's probably not gonna work out so well. But I think it's forced managers for us, instead of like, well, they have their PTO, they're gonna take it. And now it's actually forced to go, no, you still need to put your time in on a sheet that says I'm gonna be gone, but it's forced people to have other conversations. So I would agree with you. Maybe that's KPI related, but unlimited PTO is like, well, how do I tell them that they're not getting their work done? I'm like, just say they're not getting their work done. They're like, well, how do I do that? I'm like, oh my goodness, what have you been doing? So like, it's been a small one. Yeah.
And again, I'll be talking,
Yeah, you're good.
But the beauty with technology is we have access to all these dashboards now that can measure people's workflow and how quickly are they getting it done and to what standard and how is it aligning to the goal. So if somebody brings up a question like that, it's like, let's look at the dashboard and see if you're on time with your stuff and you can afford to take that time off. Mm-hmm. It's not going to mess up the team. Great, go.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily have to be in the office as long as we have access to information to show that productivity.
Yeah, and if you don't have that information, like again, do the PTO thing of like, well, when do you think that stuff should be done? Because sometimes the clarity's on us, right? And if you can flip it, going, well, what do you think great looks like? So it's good. Sounds like you'll have a good topic. Yes.
You guys are obviously very data-driven company, so are you seeing any drastic shifts in next 1 to maybe 3 to 5 years that unemployment and travel?
Yeah, so question, are we seeing any shifts? There's clearly this I'm okay working several part-time jobs thing, which is an interesting thing. So you could argue is that I like being a server and having free time than this, or the whole gig economy thing. There is a little bit more that people are okay taking risks on the contract side. So I'm okay being a free agent, so to speak. We are seeing more people, especially over the past 18 months, flock more to stability of the company. And so if we'll kind of go through and like, hey, here's some options of what we're looking at. And it's actually, I would say that probably makes a lot of sense for more professional folks. But we're actually seeing it at the $17, $18, $16 an hour thing, which is very interesting. We had a person, I was at one of our branches yesterday, and they said this person came in, kind of a general labor type candidate, and they were literally almost interviewing us of like, well, has that company had any layoffs? How long have the assignments been? Did they, make you end assignments for the other temporary employees? We're like, whoa, because literally 18 months ago, and this story it still shocks me, but I was at a branch I think it was doesn't matter where I was, some state. And I always like to sit literally out in, we call it the bullpen, seeing all the people walk in. I just love hearing the stories, and I talk to people, whatever. And this guy came in, and I didn't know him, but I heard him talking to one of our employees, and he said, hey, I am not going to come in for the next 2 weeks. I'm going to go visit my sister in Arizona or something. And our recruiter, appropriately so, was like, Arnold, this is a great company, and if you take this vacation, you're not going to get hired on, and I can't tell them to take you back. They won't take you back. Great guy, great work ethic. They said he was amazing, and he said, totally straight face, yeah, but when I come back, you'll have another job for me for the same money, right? We're like, yes, we absolutely will, and that's the worst. But that's what things were like 18 months ago. Today it's a little different. So a little reset is probably good. I think that's a really bad behavior, is when the jobs are so plentiful that there are no consequences. I don't think we want to be in an employment market where people are scared to death to breathe wrong to lose their jobs. But a little bit of a reset is good. That was not a sustainable, fun time, for sure. Any other thoughts? Yes?
How do you lead differently UPS, being that you're employee-owned? We're an employee-owned company as well.
Okay.
It's a differentiator.
Yeah. What company are you with?
TMC Transportation.
Yeah, okay. So we had a board meeting yesterday, and that question came up. So we're looking at a bunch of acquisitions, and we're looking at some other things. And I said, so being an employee-owned company, well, one thing when you start out, you're a little bit leveraged. We're super healthy, it's great, but that's one thing. But I said, I actually have 350, 400 people that are counting on me to make good decisions, not for their weekly paycheck. They're always assuming I'm doing that, so hope I do it. But also, I want to stay here. And for us, going back to this legacy things, legacy is one of ours, and for us, it used to be legacy equaled how long have you been here? I promise you talk with someone at our company, and they're like, my name is Sam, and I've been there 18 years, I've been there 7 years. It's like I'm like, I didn't ask how long, that's just what they do. It's amazing. What I've had to redefine is legacy isn't how long you've been here. Legacy is the impact that you've made during the time that you're here. There are going to be people that are going to work for us for 2 or 3 years, and I will celebrate the fact that they're going to work for one of your companies and grow and do different things. I need to celebrate that. But the answer to that is they are counting on me to have stability and growth and something that they can be really proud of, right? And there's that whole adage of if you want to get super wealthy, you need absolute kind of focus on one thing, right? Jeff Bezos didn't get rich because he invested in the stock market. He invested in one thing, Amazon. Look them all up. To preserve wealth, you diversify. And so we have to find this balance of how do you grow and not protect, right? If it was my company, Ryan Festerling's company, I would probably be a lot more aggressive on things, but that's my tolerance. Our employees are not going like, boy, I hope you hit a grand slam, but if you don't, you're going to strike out, right? Striking out as an ESOP, it's not a good thing. And when we talk about that, we actually talk about what is our risk tolerance for that, but if I'm being honest, I'm still figuring it out. We're 3 years in, but that's kind of how I think about it. Anything else? All right, well, I really appreciate your time. It seems like this is a great expo, and thanks for coming.